The night had a pulse of its own, an electric hum that vibrated through the city like a living entity. Isla Moretti inhaled deeply as she stepped out of her car, her stiletto heels clicking against the slick pavement. Neon lights bled color onto the wet streets, flashing reds and blues that made the night feel surreal, as if she had stepped into a dream, a dangerous one. The entrance to Club Vale loomed before her, a high-end establishment that catered to the elite. It wasn't just any club, it was his. The infamous Mafia King, Damian Volkov, owned this place along with half the city's underground empire, and Isla knew she was walking straight into his domain, uninvited. She wasn't supposed to be here. Her father would kill her if he knew. But she had no choice. Swallowing her nerves, Isla adjusted the thin strap of her black dress, the silky material clinging to her like a second skin. She had dressed for the occasion, not just to blend in but to seduce, to manipulate if necessary. Information was her only goal, and if charm was the weapon she had to use, so be it. The bouncer at the entrance barely spared her a glance before stepping aside, allowing her through. Clearly, women like her, dressed to perfection, exuding confidence, were a common sight in a place like this. The moment she stepped inside, a wall of heat and music crashed into her. The bass throbbed, rattling the air with its deep, sensual beat. Bodies swayed under the dim, golden glow of chandeliers, laughter mixing with the clinking of expensive whiskey glasses. Power hummed through this place, dark and potent, as dangerous men surrounded themselves with women draped in luxury and secrets. And somewhere in the heart of it all was him. Isla knew what Damian Volkov looked like. Everyone did. He was a name spoken in hushed whispers, a ghost who lurked in the city's underbelly, untouchable and feared. He wasn't just a crime lord, he was the crime lord. Ruthless, unforgiving, an enigma wrapped in shadows. And now, she was willingly stepping into his web. Her pulse quickened as she made her way through the crowd, her eyes sweeping over the VIP section, an elevated space guarded by two men in tailored suits. She recognized them as part of Volkov's inner circle. Her father had always warned her about them. "Stay away from Volkov and his men, Isla. They don't play by the same rules we do." But tonight, rules didn't matter. She had barely taken a step closer when she felt it. The weight of a gaze. It was sharp, unwavering, and it burned into her skin like a brand. A shiver ran down her spine, a primal instinct whispering that she was being hunted. Slowly, she turned her head, only to meet the most piercing, ice-blue eyes she had ever seen. Damian Volkov was watching her. From his seat in the VIP lounge, he exuded power without even trying. Dressed in a dark, tailored suit, he looked every bit the ruthless king he was rumored to be. A man who took what he wanted. His sharp jawline, tousled dark hair, and the cold amusement dancing in his gaze sent a chill down her spine. He wasn't just looking at her, he was assessing her, as if he had already decided how this night would end. She should have looked away, should have turned around. Instead, she lifted her chin and held his gaze. The corner of his lips twitched, a hint of a smirk, but before she could take another breath, he moved. It was a blur. One moment he was seated, the next he was walking toward her, his long strides purposeful, exuding an aura so dominant that the crowd instinctively parted for him. By the time she registered what was happening, he was in front of her. Close, too close. He smelled of expensive cologne and danger, a lethal combination that sent her pulse into chaos. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured, his voice deep, smooth, deceptively calm. Isla forced a smirk, masking the way her heart slammed against her ribs. "Neither should half the criminals in this room, yet here we are." His amusement was fleeting. He tilted his head, studying her. "Brave or stupid?" "That depends," she countered. "Am I walking out of here tonight?" Something dark flickered in his eyes. "That," he murmured, "remains to be seen." Before she could react, two of his men stepped up behind her. A firm hand clamped around her wrist, and her stomach plummeted. Panic surged. She yanked her arm back, only to find she couldn't move. "Let me go!" she hissed, struggling against the iron grip. Damian didn't even blink. He simply took another slow sip of his whiskey, his gaze steady, unshaken. "You came looking for me, didn't you?" "I came looking for answers," she bit out. His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "And you think I'll just give them to you?" "I think I'll find them." she shot back. A sharp silence fell between them. Then, without a word, he turned and started walking toward the VIP section, and his men dragged her with them. "Hey!" she fought, but it was useless. The moment they stepped past the velvet ropes, the noise of the club seemed to fade, swallowed by the private intimate space of the lounge. Damian took a seat, spreading his arms along the back of the plush leather. "Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you loved it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one." Couch, exuding an air of absolute authority. His men forced Isla down into the seat across from him. Her breath came faster now, trapped. He studied her with quiet interest before setting his drink down. "Tell me, Isla Moretti, what exactly did you hope to gain by stepping into my domain?" She swallowed hard, her mind racing. She had underestimated him. But one thing was clear, she was now in the hands of the Mafia King, and he had no intention of letting her go. The silence between them was suffocating. Damian Volkov leaned back in his seat, his cold blue eyes fixed on Isla as if he had all the time in the world. The sounds of the club outside were distant now, muted by the thick walls of the VIP section. Here, in his private domain, the world bent to his will, and she was now a part of that world. Isla's pulse pounded as she tried to compose herself, ignoring the heat of the two guards standing behind her, their presence a silent warning that she wasn't leaving unless Damian allowed it. She had known stepping into his club was dangerous, but she hadn't expected to land directly in his hands so quickly. She forced her expression into something resembling control, though her body betrayed her, a fine tremor in her hands, a slight quiver in her breath. Damian noticed, of course. He noticed everything. His fingers tapped lazily against the armrest. "You still haven't answered my question, Isla," he murmured, voice smooth but edged with steel. She swallowed. "Which one?" His lips quirked, but there was no amusement in his eyes. "What exactly were you hoping to find here tonight?" Lying to him would be pointless. A man like Damian Volkov could smell deceit like blood in the water. She hesitated, then lifted her chin. "I was looking for information." A slow blink. "About what?" She exhaled, steadying herself. "You already know who my father is." A shadow flickered across his gaze. "Leonardo Moretti." His voice caressed the name like a blade. Her stomach tightened at the way he said it. Damian Volkov knew her father, that much was clear, and judging by the ice settling over his expression, whatever history lay between them wasn't friendly. She pressed on. "My father is hiding something. I don't know what, but ever since he came back from his last meeting with," she hesitated. "With you, he's been different." Damian tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Different how?" Isla's fingers curled against her lap. More paranoid, more secretive. And she wet her lips. "He mentioned your name once, when he thought I wasn't listening." Damian's expression didn't change, but the air around him grew heavier, charged with something unreadable. Isla forced herself to keep going. "He said, Volkov will not let me go. He never does." The room seemed to chill. Damian's fingers stilled against the armrest. His gaze darkened, and for a moment, Isla wondered if she had made a fatal mistake by repeating her father's words. Then he laughed. A quiet, dark chuckle that sent a shiver down her spine. "Oh, Isla," he murmured, shaking his head slightly. "You really don't know anything, do you?" A knot formed in her stomach. "Then tell me." He leaned forward slowly, elbows resting on his knees, his presence suddenly overwhelming. "Your father made a deal with me," he said, his voice softer now but laced with warning. "A deal he failed to uphold." Isla's breath hitched. "What deal?" His gaze sharpened. "That's not your concern." Her heart pounded. "It is if it involves me." A beat of silence. Then, Damian reached for his glass of whiskey, taking a slow sip before setting it down with deliberate care. "It does," he admitted. "More than you realize." A chill ran down her spine. "What do you mean?" Damian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he lifted a hand, and in an instant, one of the guards at her back moved. A piece of paper was placed onto the table between them. Isla's throat tightened as she stared at it. It was a contract. Damian's voice was deceptively calm. "Your father promised me something in exchange for my protection." She forced herself to look at the document, her stomach twisting as she skimmed over the words. Her hands clenched when she reached the final clause. Payment, 1 Isla Moretti. Blood drained from her face. Her father had sold her. She shot to her feet. This has to be a joke. Damian didn't move. He only watched her with that infuriatingly calm expression. Your father made a choice, Isla. One that saved his own skin at the cost of yours. Her breathing turned ragged. No. He would never. Wouldn't he? Damian cut her off, tilting his head. Then tell me, Isla, why do you think he's been acting so paranoid? The truth settled over her like a suffocating weight. Her father knew. He knew that his deal with Damian Volkov would come due, and instead of warning her, instead of protecting her, he had let her walk straight into the lion's den. Rage and betrayal burned through her veins. You can't just expect me to accept this, she whispered, shaking her head. I'm not a piece of property. Damian exhaled slowly. No, you're not. He stood, stepping closer. But the debt is still there. Her heart pounded as he closed the space between them, until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His fingers lifted, brushing against her jaw, gentle yet unyielding. You have two choices, he murmured, voice low, intoxicating. You can walk out of here tonight and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, waiting for the debt to catch up to you. He leaned closer, his breath a whisper against her skin. Or you can stay, he continued, and learn what it means to be mine. Her body betrayed her. A shiver ran through her, though whether it was from fear or something deeper, something darker, she wasn't sure. She forced herself to meet his gaze. And if I refuse? His lips curved slightly. Then I'll come find you. His thumb traced over her cheek. And next time, Isla, his voice was a promise, dark and absolute. I won't be this gentle. The contract between them lay on the table, its inked words sealing her fate in a way more binding than any physical chain. Isla couldn't move, could barely breathe, as the weight of Damian's claim settled around her like a collar. He owned her, or at least he thought he did. Her heart pounded, each beat a war drum against her ribs. Isla had spent her entire life believing she had control over her own destiny, that no matter how cruel her father was, she still had choices. But now? Now she was debt payment. Her father had sold her to this man, to Damian Volkov, the most feared Mafia King in the underworld. She forced herself to meet his gaze, to ignore the way his touch still lingered on her skin like an invisible mark. This is insane, she whispered, voice raw with disbelief. You can't expect me to just accept this. Damian's expression didn't change. I expect you to understand what has already been decided. Anger flared in her chest, battling the fear curling in her stomach. Decided by who? I never agreed to this. He tilted his head slightly, watching her like she was an animal cornered in a trap. Your father made that decision for you. Isla's jaw clenched. Her father. A man who had spent her childhood turning a blind eye to her existence unless it suited him. He'd sent her away to boarding schools, kept her at a distance, ensured that she was more an obligation than a daughter. But this was a new level of betrayal. And now she was standing before a man who thrived on control. A man who could have snapped his fingers and ended her life in the blink of an eye. The weight of it all pressed against her chest. She needed to breathe. She needed to think. I need time, she murmured, voice barely above a whisper. Damian's gaze didn't waver. No, Isla, he said smoothly. What you need is to understand that time is a luxury you no longer have. Her pulse spiked. You had a life before tonight. A before. He took a slow step forward. That's gone now. Her body went rigid. You expect me to just leave everything behind? My job? She cut herself off, realizing too late that she had nothing to list. No family, no friends, no safe place to return to. Damian noticed. The cruel twist of his lips told her he had seen right through her. What exactly are you leaving behind, Isla? He asked, voice like silk laced with poison. A father who didn't hesitate to use you as collateral. A life of scraping by, trying to survive on your own? She hated that he was right. Hated that a part of her, the part that had always been so tired of running, of struggling, of never belonging, whispered that maybe, just maybe, she was better off here. No. She refused to let herself think that way. She lifted her chin, grasping onto the last shred of defiance she had left. "I don't care what my father did. I am not staying here." Damian exhaled, as if he had expected this answer. "You think you have a choice." His tone was calm, but there was something in his eyes, a challenge, a warning. And then, before she could react, he moved. 1 second, he was standing across the room. The next, he was right in front of her. Isla barely had time to breathe before he caught her wrist and yanked her forward. She gasped, her body colliding against his chest, her pulse a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. Damian's grip was firm, his touch searing. He wasn't hurting her, but he wasn't letting her go either. "You want to run?" he murmured, voice dark and too close. "Go ahead." She stilled. He leaned in, his breath ghosting over her ear. "But understand this." His fingers tightened just slightly around her wrist. "If you run, I will find you. And when I do, Isla." His lips brushed against the shell of her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. "You won't like what happens next." A chill spread through her limbs, not from fear, from something worse. A twisted thrill, a sick heat curling low in her stomach. A part of her that responded to the danger wrapped around Damian Volkov like a second skin. She swallowed, trying to steady herself. "You can't keep me here forever." His lips curved. "Can't I?" Her pulse jumped. Damian released her wrist, but the ghost of his touch remained. He stepped back, studying her with those cold, assessing eyes. "You have until tomorrow morning to make your decision," he said. Isla blinked. "What?" "Stay willingly," he continued, "and I'll give you privileges. Freedom within my world." Her stomach twisted. "And if I don't?" The corner of his mouth lifted. "Then I'll take away the illusion of choice." A sharp knock on the door interrupted the suffocating silence. One of his guards stepped in, murmuring something in Russian. Damian nodded once before turning back to her. "Your room is down the hall," he said smoothly, as if they were discussing nothing more than a hotel stay. "You'll be escorted there now." "Damian." His gaze snapped to hers and her breath caught. "Tomorrow, Isla," he murmured, voice dropping to something almost gentle. "Let's see if you're as defiant then." And with that, he turned and walked out, leaving her standing in the center of the room, her world unraveling around her. The door to her new prison clicked shut behind her, and Isla's breath came fast and uneven. The room was beautiful, too beautiful, like a gilded cage designed to make her forget she was trapped. Thick velvet drapes framed the windows, their deep crimson color rich against the dark wood furniture. A chandelier overhead cast a soft golden glow, and the bed, massive, intimidating in its luxury, stood in the center, draped in silk sheets that screamed of wealth. But no matter how grand the room was, the walls still felt like they were closing in. She rushed toward the windows, heart pounding. Her fingers fumbled against the cold glass as she tried to pry them open, but locked. Of course. Her breath hitched, frustration clawing at her throat. She scanned the room for another exit. There was a balcony, but it was at least 3 stories up, and the sheer drop below was lined with guards. No way out. Isla clenched her fists. This isn't happening. This isn't happening. Her father had sold her, traded her like a possession, and now she was here, caught in the web of a man who didn't believe in mercy. Damian Volkov. Even thinking his name sent a chill down her spine. He was a man who commanded obedience, respect, and fear in equal measure. A man who spoke in careful, measured tones because he knew his power didn't require raising his voice. And now he had set his sights on her. A knock at the door made her jerk. She spun around, heart hammering against her ribs. A man stepped inside, not Damian, but one of his men. He was tall and built like a wall of muscle, dressed in black, his expression unreadable. "Your dinner," he said simply, stepping aside as 2 more guards entered, carrying silver trays. They set them down on the table before stepping back. Isla didn't move. The first man, Matteo, she realized, remembering his name from earlier, gestured toward the food. "Eat." Her stomach twisted. The scent of roasted meat and buttery vegetables filled the air, but she had no appetite. "I'm not hungry," she said. Matteo's eyes darkened slightly. "That wasn't a request." Her pulse spiked, but she squared her shoulders. I said I'm not hungry." A tense silence stretched between them. Then the door behind him opened, and Damian stepped in. The air changed instantly. His presence was a force, commanding attention without needing to say a word. He was still dressed in the same black suit from earlier, but now his jacket was unbuttoned, his sleeves slightly rolled up, Isla's throat dried. His gaze flicked to the untouched food, then back to her. Assessing, calculating. "Leave us," he murmured. Mateo hesitated for only a second before nodding. The guards filed out of the room, shutting the door behind them. Silence. Damian exhaled softly, his gaze never leaving hers. "You're refusing to eat." It wasn't a question. Isla lifted her chin. "I don't take orders like a pet." A dangerous glint sparked in his eyes. He took a slow step forward, closing the distance between them with predatory ease. "Is that what you think this is?" he mused. "You believe I see you as nothing more than a pet." She forced herself to hold his gaze. "That's what you called me earlier, isn't it? Your pet. Your plaything." Something dark flickered across his face. "You're mistaken," he murmured. "A pet is something fragile, something weak." He took another step forward, and Isla felt her body react, tense, aware, on edge. "You," Damian continued, voice smooth as silk, "are something else entirely." Her breath caught. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or even more terrified. But Damian didn't elaborate. Instead, he reached for one of the plates, lifting a forkful of food. "Eat," he said simply. Isla crossed her arms. "I told you I'm not hungry." A ghost of a smirk curled at his lips. "Stubborn," he mused. "But you'll learn, Isla." She stiffened. Before she could react, he moved. Faster than she anticipated, he closed the distance between them and reached out, grabbing her chin, tilting her face up toward his. A sharp inhale escaped her lips. His grip was firm, not bruising, but unwavering. His eyes burned into hers, and for a brief moment, she felt caught, like he was peeling back every layer, reading her deepest fears before she could hide them. Then, with deliberate slowness, he brought the fork to her lips. "Open." A flush of anger, humiliation, something worse spread through her veins. She clenched her jaw. "I said no." A pause. Then, Damian laughed. Low, deep, and utterly amused. The sound made something coil tight in her stomach. "You're playing a dangerous game, Isla," he murmured, still holding her chin. "But I like that fire in you." Her breath was coming too fast, her pulse erratic. Then, just as quickly as he had grabbed her, he let go. Stepping back, he set the fork down with a soft clink. "Have it your way," he said, his tone unreadable. "But you should know I don't tolerate disobedience for long." A shiver ran down her spine. "Good night, Isla." And just like that, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving her with a racing heart and a mind filled with dangerous thoughts. The door shut with a soft click, but the sound echoed in Isla's ears like a gunshot. She stood there, frozen, her heart pounding against her ribs. Damian Volkov. Everything about him was a contradiction, controlled but terrifying, gentle in his movements but commanding in his presence. He had tested her just now, and she had refused to break. But for how long could she hold out? Her eyes darted to the untouched food on the table. Her stomach twisted, not with hunger, but with unease. She hadn't eaten since morning, but something about consuming food prepared in this place, under his watchful gaze, made her feel like she was giving in. Her fingers clenched. No, she would not play into his hands. She turned away from the food and moved toward the bed. As much as she hated it, she needed rest. If she wanted to survive this, she had to stay sharp, think strategically. But sleep did not come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the unreadable glint in his dark gaze, the smirk that played on his lips as if he already knew how this game would end. A pet. That's what he called her. But Isla was not a pet. She was a prisoner. And prisoners didn't stay locked up forever. The sound of the door unlocking jolted Isla awake. Her body tensed immediately. For a moment she had forgotten where she was. But then reality crashed back in. She was still here, still trapped in this gilded cage. A maid entered, her head bowed. She was young, no older than Isla, with a soft face and wary eyes. She carried a tray of breakfast, fresh fruit, toast, eggs, and a steaming cup of coffee. Another test. The maid placed the tray on the bedside table. "You should eat, miss," she said, barely above a whisper. Isla hesitated. "What happens if I don't?" The girl's fingers curled around the edge of her apron. "You don't want to know." That sent a chill down Isla's spine. But before she could ask more, the maid turned and left, shutting the door behind her. Isla stared at the tray. Damian was playing a game, pushing her, seeing how far he could bend her before she broke. She reached for the coffee, lifting the cup to her lips. If nothing else, she needed caffeine. The rich, bitter taste filled her mouth, warming her from the inside out. It was good. Too good. A sinking feeling settled in her stomach. Nothing here would be given to her out of kindness. The moment she put the cup down, the door opened again. And this time, it was him. Damian entered the room with the same quiet authority as always, dressed in another dark suit, his tie loosened just slightly. "Good morning, Isla." His voice sent a shiver down her spine. She didn't respond. His eyes flicked to the tray. "I see you've had some of your coffee." Again, she didn't reply. Damian exhaled softly, as if amused by her silence. Then, with deliberate slowness, he walked toward her. Isla tensed, refusing to back away. He stopped just a breath away, close enough that she could smell the clean, sharp scent of his cologne, woodsy, expensive, undeniably male. "You think this is a game," he murmured. "You think you have choices here." A pulse of anger surged through her. "I do have choices." His lips curved slightly. "Do you?" Before she could react, his hand shot out, gripping her chin just like he had last night. Isla gasped, but he didn't squeeze, didn't hurt. His grip was firm, unyielding, but careful. "You still don't understand, do you?" His voice was quiet, more dangerous than if he had yelled. Her pulse thundered. "You belong to me now, Isla." His thumb brushed over her jaw, a touch both possessive and taunting. "But," he continued, his tone almost indulgent, "if you want to test me, I can show you exactly what happens to those who defy me." A chill ran down her spine. Was this it? Was this where he would punish her for last night? But then, he let go. She exhaled sharply, barely realizing she had been holding her breath. Damian stepped back, adjusting his cuffs as if he hadn't just rattled her entire world. "You'll be joining me for dinner tonight," he said. "Don't keep me waiting." Then, without another word, he was gone, leaving Isla standing there, shaking, wondering just how much longer she could hold her ground. The hours crawled by. Isla paced the confines of the grand bedroom, every step fueled by frustration and something far more dangerous, fear wrapped in defiance. Dinner. Damian had summoned her. He hadn't asked. He hadn't given her a choice. It was a command. And deep down, Isla knew that disobeying would come with consequences. Her fingers curled into fists. She had never been the type of woman to bow easily. She had survived so much, clawed her way through life, refusing to be anyone's possession. And yet, here she was, locked in this luxurious prison, about to play along in his sick game. She glanced at the vanity. A black dress lay draped over the chair. Elegant. Expensive. Something a woman would wear to a high-class dinner party, not a captive forced into submission. A note sat on top of the fabric. "Wear this." Her throat tightened. The arrogance, the control. He expected her to dress like some perfect doll for him, and yet... She reached out, fingertips grazing the silk. A shiver ran down her spine. The fabric was soft, too soft. She snatched her hand back. No. If he thought she would dress up for him, for his amusement, he was sorely mistaken. Isla turned her back on the dress, her mind racing. She would go to this dinner, yes, but she would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her bend to his will. She would not wear his dress. She would fight him in every way she could, even if it was something as small as this. The guards arrived just before sundown, 2 of them, silent, impassive. They didn't touch her, didn't force her, but their presence alone was enough to remind her that she was not free. Isla followed them through the vast, twisting hallways of the mansion. She hadn't explored much of this place, but what little she had seen only cemented one fact: Damian Volkov was untouchable. Power dripped from every inch of the estate. Marble floors gleamed under the dim lighting, Towering windows framed a night sky littered with stars, and every piece of furniture screamed wealth, but not just wealth. Power, control. An empire built from blood. The guards led her through a pair of massive double doors, and there, waiting for her, was him. Damian sat at the head of a long, candlelit dining table. He was dressed in all black, his suit pristine, his presence dark and magnetic. But his gaze burned. The moment his eyes locked on her, something in the air shifted. His jaw ticked, his fingers curled slightly against the table's surface. It took Isla a second to realize why. She had defied him. She wasn't wearing the dress he had picked out. Instead, she had chosen to wear the same clothes from earlier, plain, wrinkled from the night before, a silent act of rebellion. The tension coiled between them, thick and suffocating. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was dangerous, amused, like a wolf staring at a rabbit who had just dared to bare its tiny teeth. "You look." Damian's voice was smooth, slow, as if he were savoring the moment. "Unimpressed." Isla lifted her chin. "Should I be impressed?" A beat of silence. Then, with the same casual grace he always carried, he gestured toward the chair across from him. "Sit." It wasn't a request, but Isla, ever defiant, took her time moving toward the chair. She lowered herself into the seat, keeping her expression carefully neutral. Damian studied her for a long moment, then reached for a bottle of red wine. He poured a glass for himself. Then, without asking, he poured one for her. The rich crimson liquid sloshed against the delicate crystal. "Drink," he said, nudging the glass toward her. Isla's fingers twitched. Another test. Would she drink? Or would she refuse and suffer whatever punishment he had in store? She met his gaze, searching for a sign, a trap hidden in the depths of his eyes. Nothing. Just that same unreadable darkness. Slowly she reached for the glass. She didn't drink, not yet. Instead she held it, running a finger along the rim. Damian leaned back in his chair, watching her with sharp, unreadable amusement. "You're bold," he murmured. "I like that." Isla exhaled through her nose. "I don't care what you like." His lips twitched. "You should." Silence. Then the first course arrived. A waiter dressed in all black placed a dish in front of her. Seared steak, aged to perfection. A dish meant for royalty, for kings. But Isla had no appetite. Not when she was sitting across from a man who had stolen her freedom. Still, Damian ate. Cutting into his steak with precision, he chewed, swallowed, watching her. Minutes passed. The silence stretched. "You didn't eat your breakfast," he finally said. Isla's grip tightened around her fork. "You're observant," she muttered. His smirk deepened. "I have eyes everywhere, Isla. Nothing happens in my house without me knowing." There it was, the warning, the reminder. "You can play this little game for as long as you want," Damian continued, setting down his fork. "But sooner or later, you'll realize something." He leaned forward, his presence wrapping around her like a shadow. "You already belong to me." Isla's pulse pounded. Her fingers dug into her lap, but she refused to let her expression crack. Instead, she lifted the glass of wine, meeting his gaze. And then, she took a slow, deliberate sip. Damian exhaled a quiet chuckle, eyes gleaming with something dangerous. "Good girl." She almost shattered the glass in her hand, but she didn't. She simply set it down, leveled him with a cold glare, and whispered, "Go to hell." His smirk widened. "Darling, I own hell." And just like that, Isla knew, the real game was only beginning. The air was thick with something unspoken. The moment those words had left Isla's lips, "Go to hell." She had expected a reaction, violence, rage, cold fury. But Damian had simply smirked. That was what unsettled her most. Not the threats, not the unspoken promises of punishment, but the way he looked at her, as if she was his favorite puzzle to solve. Now she was alone again in the massive bedroom he had caged her in. The dinner had ended with nothing, no explosion, no forceful punishment. Just a simple order from Damian: "Go to bed, Isla. Tomorrow you'll understand who you belong to." The way he had said it had sent a cold ripple down her spine. Tomorrow. What the hell did that mean? She paced the room, hands shaking with frustration. There had to be a way out. Damian wasn't God. He wasn't untouchable. Even the most powerful men had weaknesses. And Isla would find his. She just had to survive long enough to use it against him. She must have drifted off eventually, because when she woke, the room was no longer bathed in moonlight. It was still dark, but different. Wrong. Her pulse pounded. Something was in the room. Her instincts screamed it before she even saw him. A shadowed figure leaned against the wall near the window, barely visible in the dim glow of the city lights filtering through the curtains. Tall, silent, unmovable. Damian, watching, waiting. How long had he been there? A shiver crawled down her spine. She gritted her teeth. "What the hell are you doing?" His voice was maddeningly calm, too calm. "Observing." She sat up, heart hammering. "You don't sleep?" A soft chuckle, low, amused, dangerous. "A king never sleeps, darling." She clenched her fists beneath the silk sheets. "That's cute. You think you're a king." Finally he moved, not rushed, not aggressive, just a slow, measured stride as he approached the bed, a predator closing in. He stopped at the edge, hands in his pockets. His suit was still pristine, as if he hadn't moved at all since dinner. "Tell me, Isla," he murmured. "Do you think I brought you here to be difficult?" She met his gaze, fire burning in her own. "You brought me here to break me." Silence. Then a smile. "Break you?" His voice was velvet over steel, darkly amused. Slowly, he lowered himself to sit on the edge of the bed. Not touching her. Not yet, but too close. "That's where you're wrong," he said smoothly. "I don't need to break you." His fingers traced the silk sheets near her knee, not quite touching her but close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "You'll come to me willingly." Isla swallowed hard. She hated how her body reacted. The slow curl of heat at the base of her spine, the way her pulse quickened, not just in fear, but in something more treacherous. "That will never happen," she said, forcing steel into her voice. Damian tilted his head slightly. A flicker of something dangerous passed through his gaze. "Never." The single word carried a warning, a promise. She saw it before she felt it. The moment his hand reached for her ankle, her body reacted on instinct. She kicked, not wildly, not desperate, aimed, precise. Her foot connected with his chest, shoving him back. Not enough to truly hurt him, but enough to make a statement. She expected anger. She expected retaliation, but Damian simply laughed. A low, rich sound that sent a shiver down her spine. His eyes gleamed as he adjusted his suit, as if she had amused him. "Good," he murmured. "Fight me, Isla. It'll make this more interesting." Her throat went dry. He wanted this. He wanted her to fight, to push back, because in his mind, he had already won. The next morning, Isla learned what tomorrow meant. She was dragged out of bed before dawn. 2 guards, silent, efficient, no breakfast, no explanations, just a command: "Get dressed, the king is waiting." The king. Her stomach twisted. Minutes later, she was led through the mansion again. This time, the path was different, down a corridor she hadn't seen before, through a door that led into something cold, a training room, not for weights, not for luxury, for discipline. Chains hung from the walls. A single leather chair sat in the center, and there, standing beside it, dressed in black, hands clasped behind his back, was Damian. Waiting. A storm of dread crashed through Isla's chest. "You're awake," he said smoothly. She swallowed. "What is this?" "A lesson." Her heart pounded. "Lesson in what?" His gaze pinned her. Obedience. The moment Isla was led into that cold, shadowed training room, she knew. This was different. This wasn't another show of power. This wasn't Damian playing games with her, taunting her from across a dinner table. This was punishment, the kind of punishment that wasn't spoken aloud, the kind that didn't need to be. Her breath turned shallow as she took in the room. It was designed for one purpose. Not pain, necessarily. Not yet. But control. The walls were lined with chains, elegant but unyielding, metal cuffs gleaming under the dim overhead lights. A single leather chair sat in the center of the room, positioned like a throne. And beside it, Damian stood waiting, dressed in black, hands behind his back. Unmoved. unbreakable. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing her fate. The guards didn't follow inside. They didn't need to. Damian was more dangerous than all of them combined. A slow, suffocating silence filled the room. Isla forced herself to straighten, keeping her chin high despite the storm raging inside her. "What is this?" she asked, her voice sharper than she felt. Damian's gaze met hers, unreadable. "A lesson." Her fingers curled into fists. "A lesson in what?" His lips curled slightly. "Obedience." The word slithered down her spine. She expected anger. She expected him to force her into that chair, chain her down, demand submission. Instead, Damian simply walked toward her, slow, controlled, like a predator circling its prey. "I was patient with you, Isla," he murmured. "I allowed you to test your limits, to push against me." She forced a bitter smile. "And here I thought you enjoyed the challenge." A deep, rich chuckle left his lips. "I do." She hated the way her pulse reacted. Hated that even now, when he was clearly dangerous, some part of her was drawn to the way he carried himself. The dark elegance, the quiet authority. She had grown up around powerful men, her father, his associates. But Damian? Damian wasn't just powerful. He was something else entirely, something more dangerous, more consuming. "You think I don't know what you're doing," he said, taking another step. Isla didn't back away. She wouldn't give him that. "And what am I doing?" she asked. Damian tilted his head slightly. "You want to make me angry. You want me to lose control." His hand lifted, so fast she barely saw it. Fingers brushed just beneath her chin, tilting her head up. His grip wasn't harsh, but it wasn't gentle either. "You think I'll punish you in a way you expect," he murmured. "That I'll hit you, hurt you, prove to you that I'm the monster you already believe me to be." Isla swallowed hard, but she refused to look away. "Aren't you?" she whispered. His thumb brushed her lower lip, not in affection, in possession. "You'll learn," he said softly, "that there are far more effective ways to break a person than pain." A shiver ghosted through her body. Not from fear. Not from just fear. And Damian knew it. That was the worst part. He could see it in her. The way her breath hitched when he was too close. The way her pulse raced, not just in defiance, but in something darker. She hated him. She hated him. But her body was betraying her. His lips curved. He saw everything. "You want to fight," he murmured. She did. "Then fight me, Isla," he said, stepping back. "Let's see how far you make it." She didn't wait. Isla moved. She lunged, not wildly, not foolishly, but with purpose. Her fist cut through the air, aiming for his jaw. Fast, precise, controlled. Damian caught her wrist before she even saw him move. His grip was iron. Pain lashed up her arm as he twisted her wrist behind her back, yanking her against his chest. Too fast, too strong. Her breath left her in a sharp gasp. She struggled, fought against him, twisting in his hold. But Damian was unshaken. His grip never tightened enough to break, never bruised, but it was final. He could end her fight whenever he wanted. That was the real lesson. She hadn't stood a chance. His lips brushed her ear. "You're not weak," he murmured. "I like that." Her pulse slammed against her ribs. "But you are," he added, voice like velvet and steel, "out of your depth." And with effortless force, Damian spun her, slamming her back against the wall. Her breath hitched. He didn't touch her again, didn't pin her. He just stood there, so close she could feel the heat of his body, his presence caging her in. "I told you," he murmured. His voice was low, dangerous. "You will come to me willingly." Her throat was dry. She opened her mouth to argue, to spit something sharp back in his face, but the words never came, because Damian leaned in, not to kiss her, to breathe her in, to let his presence consume her. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "we'll try again." And then he was gone, leaving Isla in the dark, shaken, breathless, and with the terrifying realization that somewhere deep inside her, she wasn't just afraid of him, she was afraid of herself. The darkness pressed against Isla like a second skin. Hours had passed since Damian had left her alone in that suffocating room. Yet the weight of his presence still clung to her, wrapping around her lungs like a noose. She hadn't moved from where he left her, not because she was afraid, she refused to admit that, but because something inside her had shifted, something she couldn't quite name. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms, forcing herself to focus. She was Isla Moretti, the daughter of a powerful mafia family. She had spent her life surrounded by dangerous men. But none of them were like Damian. None of them looked at her the way he did, as if they could see into her, beyond her words, beyond her resistance, as if they knew exactly how to unravel her. The door opened with a soft click, and a sliver of golden light spilled into the room. A shadow moved, and then he was there. Damian walked inside with the same calm, unshakable confidence he always carried. Like he was in control of everything, like he was in control of her. "Get up." His voice was low, commanding, a challenge. Isla forced her body to obey even as her muscles ached from the tension. She stood, keeping her head high, unyielding. Damian studied her in silence, his piercing eyes tracing over her features, waiting, watching. "Did you learn your lesson?" The question was almost mocking. Her jaw tightened. "Which one?" A slow smirk tugged at his lips. "The one where you realize fighting me is pointless." Rage ignited in her blood, but she swallowed it down. She wouldn't let him see her break. "I didn't fight you," she said smoothly. "I tested you." Something flickered in his gaze. Amusement, interest. He stepped closer, his presence a dark tide consuming the space between them. "You think you're testing me, Tesoro?" His voice was velvet and steel. "That's adorable." She hated the way her pulse reacted. Hated that the way he looked at her, like she was a puzzle he was eager to solve, made her breath hitch. "You're wasting your time," she bit out. "I'll never be obedient to you." Damian lifted a brow. "Never?" Her silence was answer enough. He sighed, almost disappointed. Then he moved. Not fast, not violent, just decisive. In one effortless motion, he grabbed her wrist and pulled her forward. Isla barely had time to react before he spun her around and pinned her against the wall. Her breath caught in her throat, not from pain, from the sheer force of his presence, from the way his hand wrapped around her throat, not squeezing, just holding, just reminding her that he could. "Do you know what the difference is between you and me?" he murmured. She refused to answer. His thumb traced over the pulse beating wildly beneath her skin. "I know when to surrender," he said. Her brows furrowed. His grip didn't tighten. Instead, he leaned in, his lips brushing just below her ear, his voice a dark whisper against her skin. "Surrendering isn't weakness, Isla." His free hand lifted, fingers ghosting down her arm, slow, deliberate. "It's strategy." She shuddered before she could stop herself. His touch wasn't meant to be soothing. It was meant to remind her he was in control. He let go suddenly, stepping back. The air between them was thick, charged. Her breath was ragged, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. He looked at her like he was waiting for something. For her to admit defeat, for her to realize he was right. Instead, she laughed. It was breathless, shaky, but it was defiant. Damian tilted his head, intrigued. "You think this is funny?" She smirked. "I think you're delusional if you think I'll ever surrender to you." A slow smile spread across his face, but it wasn't kind, it wasn't amused, it was dangerous. "Then I'll have to make you." The next 3 days were pure hell. Damian didn't torture her, he didn't have to. Instead, he broke her down in ways she never expected. He controlled everything, when she ate, when she slept, when she breathed. He forced her into a routine of obedience. Every morning she was brought to him, and every morning she was given a choice. Submit, or suffer the consequences. The first day, she refused. He locked her in that room, alone, in the dark. No food, no water. The second day, she refused again. He didn't touch her, didn't raise a hand. Instead, he let her watch. He brought in a man, a traitor, he said, a man who had betrayed his loyalty. And he made her watch as he dealt with him. No blood, no screams, just a quiet, calculated punishment. The kind that left no marks on the body, but shattered the soul. By the third day, she was losing her grip. She wasn't weak, she wasn't, but Damian was relentless. Every moment was a test, every second a lesson in control, and every time she fought him, he only tightened his grip. By the fourth day, she was cracking. She barely noticed when he entered her room that night, barely reacted when he sat beside her on the bed, his presence heavy and unyielding. "You're exhausted," he murmured. She didn't answer. His fingers brushed her hair back, surprisingly gentle, and for the first time since this war between them began, her body didn't flinch from his touch, because she was tired, because he was winning, and Damian knew it. "Just say the words," he whispered. She swallowed hard, because she wanted to. She wanted to say, "I give up." She wanted to stop fighting. But if she did, she would never be the same. And that scared her more than anything else. The silence was the worst part. No chains, no whips, no bruises on her skin. Only the deafening, suffocating silence that wrapped around Isla like an invisible prison. She had spent 4 days locked in this twisted battle of wills with Damian. 4 days of control, submission, and resistance. 4 days of him chipping away at her defenses. And now, as she sat curled on the pristine white sheets of the massive bed, she could feel the cracks forming. She hadn't broken, not yet. But the walls of her mind were weakening, brick by brick, under the weight of his methods. He never raised a hand to her. He didn't need to. He owned every second of her life now, her sleep, her hunger, her pain, her relief. And tonight, she knew, would be the moment everything changed. Because tonight. She wasn't sure if she had the strength to fight anymore. The door swung open, not slammed, not thrown, just opened, slow, precise. As if he already knew the outcome of this war, Damian stepped inside, his dark silhouette outlined against the dim glow from the hallway. His suit jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled up, veins visible along his forearms. His movements were unhurried, controlled, like a king inspecting his captive prize. He was always calm, always composed, and that made him far more terrifying than any violent man Isla had ever faced. He stopped at the foot of the bed, watching her, waiting, like a wolf watching a wounded doe, waiting for it to collapse. "Get up," he said. Isla didn't move, not because she was defying him, but because she wasn't sure she could anymore. Her body was stiff, her limbs weak from exhaustion and hunger, and she knew he saw it. His gaze flickered, a small glint of satisfaction flashing through those dark, calculating eyes. "Still resisting?" His voice was a quiet mockery, a test. She wanted to say something, anything, to spit in his face, to curse him. But her throat was too dry, her lips too parched. She had spent hours, maybe days, trapped in his controlled deprivation, starved of freedom, starved of choice, starved of him. And that was the worst part of all. Because he had done something she never expected. He had made her crave his presence, not through kindness, not through affection, but through sheer conditioning. By controlling when she saw him, when he touched her, when he spoke to her, he had made his presence the only certainty in her existence. And she hated him for it. Her breath trembled as she forced herself to lift her head. Damian tilted his head, his gaze scanning her face, his expression unreadable. "You're close," he murmured. "Close to what? Breaking? Surrendering?" He reached for her before she could react, his fingers curling around her wrist, warm, unshakable. A contrast to the cold emptiness surrounding her. A contrast to everything she wanted to fight. She stiffened, but he didn't let go. Instead, he pulled her to her feet, slowly, deliberately, watching every reaction. She swayed, her body betraying her. Her knees nearly buckled, but his grip tightened, keeping her upright. A slow smirk tugged at his lips. "Look at you," he murmured. "So proud, so stubborn." She swallowed hard, forcing herself to glare up at him. "You're delusional if you think I'll ever give in to you." Damian's eyes darkened with something unreadable, something dangerous. Then he laughed, low, dark, amused. It sent shivers down her spine. "Tesoro," he said, voice like silk over steel. "You already have." Her blood turned to ice. She wanted to deny it. She needed to. But deep down, in the hollow pit of her stomach, she felt the truth. She wasn't the same woman who had been dragged into his world. She was changing. And Damian knew it. He guided her toward the small table in the room. A single plate of food sat there, untouched. She knew the game. Every night he did this. He left food for her. But she never took it. Because she knew accepting it meant accepting him. Tonight, he sat her down in the chair, his hands resting on her shoulders before moving away. She stared at the plate. The smell was overwhelming, torturous. Her stomach twisted, desperate. But she didn't move. She wouldn't. Because if she did, it would mean he owned her. She felt him watching. Felt his presence like a brand on her skin. Then his voice, quiet and lethal. Eat. Her fingers trembled. She clenched them into fists. No, she wouldn't. She, a hand on her chin, firm, unyielding, tilting her head back, forcing her to look up at him. Damian's gaze was unreadable, but his grip told her everything. This was it. The moment. Isla, he murmured, his thumb brushing over her lower lip. Eat. A command. A final test. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She could resist. She could fight. She could lose. Or she could surrender. Her breath came in shallow pants. Her hands shook. And then, her fingers moved. She reached for the fork. Slow. Reluctant. Damian didn't look away, didn't move, he just waited. And when she finally lifted the bite to her lips, something shifted in his gaze. Satisfaction. Possession. Victory. Because she had just crossed the line. And there was no turning back. Silence settled between them. A suffocating, unrelenting silence. The kind that made the walls seem closer. The air thinner. The space between them dangerous. Damian hadn't moved since she took that first bite. But his eyes, they devoured her. The dark gleam of satisfaction in them sent a cold shiver down her spine. She had done it. She had given in. Not because she wanted to. Not because she had surrendered. But because her body was too weak to resist anymore. At least, that's what she told herself. But Damian, he saw something different. He saw victory. He saw the first crack, and that terrified her more than anything. Good girl, the words were quiet, almost a whisper, but they hit her harder than any slap ever could. A flush of humiliation burned under her skin, even as her stomach twisted in on itself. Not from hunger, not from fear, but from something much more dangerous. Something she refused to acknowledge. Damian leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, watching her like a predator savoring its prey. Tell me, he murmured, did it taste good? Her fingers curled into fists. She refused to answer. But he didn't need her words. The act itself had been enough. He knew he had won this round. And that was the worst part. He wasn't gloating. There was no arrogance in his tone, no mockery in his expression, just pure, calculated dominance. Because he knew something she didn't. He knew that tonight was the beginning of the end. Her end. Because no matter how much she fought, how much she resisted, she was already his. Damian pushed the plate closer to her. You'll eat every night from now on, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I won't have you weak, not when you belong to me. Her body flinched at the word, belong. It sent ice through her veins. Her mouth opened, an insult ready to spill out, but before she could say a word, he stood. The chair scraped against the floor, and suddenly he was behind her. Close. Too close. His heat burned against her back. The faint scent of leather, smoke, and something undeniably male surrounded her, making her stomach twist in ways she didn't understand. She forced herself not to react, not to pull away, not to let him see how much his presence unsettled her, but Damian wasn't the kind of man to be ignored. A single finger traced the curve of her exposed shoulder. Slow, purposeful. Her breath hitched, her body went rigid. Are you afraid, Isla? His voice was a ghost against her ear. She clenched her jaw. No, a dark chuckle. Then you're lying to yourself. His hand slid lower, skimming the fabric of her dress, his fingers barely brushing against her skin, a cruel tease. He wasn't touching her, not really. But he was controlling her anyway. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, a traitorous drum against her ribs. She hated this, hated him, hated how he made her feel like her own body wasn't her own anymore. Like he had somehow invaded the very air she breathed. His breath was warm against her skin as he leaned in, his lips a whisper away from her neck. You'll learn soon enough, he murmured. There's no point in fighting what's already decided. She swallowed hard. His words dripped with finality, like he had already made the choice for her. And deep down she knew, Damian DeLuca never lost. The next few days blurred together. Not because she was locked away in darkness, not because she was shackled or beaten, but because Damian had changed his tactics. There were no more threats, no more force. Instead, he used patience, and that was far more dangerous. He gave her space, gave her time, but not freedom, never freedom. Instead of dragging her to him, he let her come to him, or at least, he made her think it was her choice. Every morning, breakfast appeared on the table. Every night, dinner was served, and every time she refused to touch it. At first, until hunger won, until the scent of the food became unbearable, until her body betrayed her. And Damian? He was always watching, always waiting. Every single bite she took, his gaze never wavered. Not with cruelty, not with mockery, but with certainty. Because he knew exactly what he was doing. He was training her. And she knew it too. But knowing didn't make it any easier to resist. On the sixth night, everything changed. Isla sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closed door, knowing what was coming. Her heart pounded, her breath was shallow, because tonight she could feel it. Damian wasn't going to be patient anymore. Tonight, the game would end, and she didn't know if she was ready for what came next. The door opened. Damian stepped inside, his presence filling the room like a storm rolling in. She looked up, her body stiff, her hands clenched into the sheets. "Stand up," he said. She hesitated, his voice darkened. "Now, Tesoro." Her legs trembled as she obeyed. He stepped closer, his body just inches from hers. His fingers traced a line down her arm, slow and deliberate, making her breath hitch. "You've fought long enough," he murmured. A pause. A heartbeat of silence. And then, his fingers tilted her chin up. Her lips parted, a sharp inhale slipping past them. A mistake. Because in that moment, he struck. Not with violence, not with force, but with something much, much worse. His lips brushed over hers, a whisper of a kiss, soft, teasing, a promise of something dangerous. And Isla, she didn't pull away, because in that moment, she forgot how to breathe. The air was thick between them. A charged, suffocating tension that crackled like lightning. Isla's breath came fast, shallow, her pulse hammering against her throat as she stared at Damian. He was too close, and yet not close enough. His fingers still tilted her chin, keeping her face angled up toward him, forcing her to look, to see the truth in his dark, unreadable eyes. He had won, and she knew it. A part of her, the last fragile piece of defiance left inside her, wanted to push him away, to shove him, slap him, scream, to remind him that she hated him, that she would never want this. But the rest of her betrayed her. Her body burned with an aching heat, her skin hypersensitive, thrumming with something she didn't want to name. Her lips tingled from the ghost of his touch, from the way his breath caressed her mouth like a silent command. A demanding promise, one she didn't refuse, one she couldn't refuse, because something inside her had shifted. She wasn't fighting anymore, she was waiting, anticipating. And Damian saw it, he felt it, because his lips curved into something dark, something knowing. "Good girl," he murmured. The words sent a tremor down her spine, and she hated how much she liked it. Damian's hand moved lower, his fingers tracing the line of her throat. A slow, deliberate touch. Testing. Teasing. She didn't pull away. Didn't flinch. Didn't do anything except stand there. Her breath caught in her lungs, her body trapped between fear and hunger. She felt his other hand brush against her waist, fingertips grazing the fabric of her dress. "Do you know how long I've waited for this?" he whispered. His voice was low, deep, dangerous. Every syllable sent a shiver through her, made her stomach clench, made her knees weak. "You tried to fight me," he continued, his lips brushing against her ear. "But we both knew it was useless, didn't we?" A small, strangled sound caught in her throat, because he was right. She had known. Even from the moment he took her, even from the moment he locked that first chain around her soul, there was never a way out, because Damian was the way out. And now she had nowhere left to run. His mouth claimed hers, fierce, possessive. A brutal, undeniable kiss. It stole the last breath from her lungs, ripped through every last wall she had built. Her fingers curled into his shirt, gripping the fabric as if it could ground her, as if it could save her. But there was no salvation, only him, only his hands, only his heat, only his claim. And for the first time, she didn't resist. She leaned into it, into him. Her body pressed against his, her heart slamming against her ribs as she let go, let him take, let herself want, let herself need. And Damian? He felt it, he knew, and it shattered him, because Isla wasn't just surrendering, she was choosing him. The world blurred. Somehow they made it to the bed, somehow she didn't stop him, somehow her hands were on his skin, her fingers tracing scars, feeling the heat of a man who had destroyed her and made her crave the destruction. His name left her lips in a whisper, half a plea, half a confession. And Damian growled, low, dark, a sound of possession, of victory. And when he took her, when he finally claimed her, it wasn't just sex, it was ruin. It was the moment everything changed. Because there was no coming back from this. No pretending she could hate him anymore. No pretending she didn't belong to him. And as he moved inside her, his hands gripping her thighs, his mouth claiming every inch of her, marking her without a single word, Isla knew the truth. She was his. And there was no escaping it. The room was silent. Only the slow rise and fall of breath filled the space. The aftermath of what had happened lay between them, thick and undeniable. Isla's body still ached from his touch, everywhere, a reminder, a brand. Her skin felt warmer, flushed, tingling in places she never wanted to think about. But her mind was a battlefield. Because she wasn't sure what to feel. Shame, guilt, or something darker, something she wasn't ready to name. Her fingers twitched against the sheets. Her legs were still tangled with his. And Damian? He was still watching her. His head rested on one arm, his sharp predatory gaze locked onto her face, waiting, always waiting. As if he could see the war raging inside her, as if he already knew how it would end. She wanted to turn away, to pull the covers over herself, hide from him, from this, from everything, but she didn't. She couldn't. Because there was no hiding from what she had done, from what she had allowed, from what she had wanted. And Damian, he knew. That was the worst part, he knew. Say it, he murmured, his voice husky with sleep and something more, something darker, something that sent shivers down her spine. Isla's breath caught. She swallowed, forcing herself to meet his gaze. Say what? A slow smirk curled at his lips. And before she could react, before she could move, his fingers were under her chin again, tilting her face toward him, commanding, owning. Say that you're mine, he whispered. Her heart skipped. A trap. It was a trap, and she was falling right into it. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She didn't even know what she wanted to say, because the truth was too dangerous, too terrifying. So she stayed silent. But Damian, he wasn't a man who accepted silence. His fingers brushed against her lips, slow, deliberate. You don't have to say it, he murmured, voice dark with amusement. You proved it last night. Her stomach twisted. Because he was right, she had. She had let him touch her, had let him take, had let him ruin her, and she had liked it. The realization was like a blade to her chest, painful, inevitable, unforgivable. She pushed away from him, rolling onto her side, staring at the wall as if it could erase what had happened, as if it could make her forget how his hands had felt on her skin, how he had held her down, how she had stopped fighting, how she had wanted it. The shame burned deep, but deeper than the shame was the craving, the need, the addiction forming in her veins. She squeezed her eyes shut, taking slow, shallow breaths. This wasn't her. She wasn't this girl. She wasn't someone who gave in, who let the darkness consume her. And yet, she had, and she wasn't sure she wanted to fight it anymore. She felt the bed shift behind her, the warmth of his body moving closer. She tensed but didn't pull away, didn't resist. Not even when his fingers traced a path down her spine, slow, lazy, possessive. Not even when his lips brushed against the back of her shoulder. a whisper of a touch. A silent reminder. I should get up, she murmured. Damian hummed, amused. Should you? Her fingers curled into the sheets. A slow smirk played on his lips as he watched her. Watched her struggle. Watched her drown in the war within herself. You're thinking too much again, he murmured. His hand slid lower, fingers grazing the curve of her hip. A small gasp slipped past her lips before she could stop it. Damian's smirk deepened. That's better, he murmured. Isla shuddered. Because she already knew the truth. This wasn't over, it was just beginning. And she? She was already too far gone. The mansion was alive by the time Isla finally stepped out of the bedroom. Guards moved through the halls, their eyes flicking toward her before quickly looking away. Servants whispered, vanishing down corridors before she could catch their words. Something had changed, or maybe. It had always been this way, and she was only noticing it now. She could still feel him, even though Damian had let her go, even though his hands weren't on her now. The ghost of his touch lingered. Everywhere. And worst of all, she felt empty without it. She had barely taken a few steps when a voice called out from behind her. Did you enjoy your night with the king, little pet? Isla stiffened. The voice was silken, mocking, and unmistakably female. She turned, heart pounding, and came face to face with her. Mafia Moretti, the Queen of Shadows, the Mafia King's closest confidant, and his former lover. She was beautiful in the way a blade was, sharp, dangerous, and lethal if you weren't careful. Dark hair coiled into a sleek chignon, emerald green dress hugging her curves like sin. She was every bit the woman Isla was not, and she was smirking. You look a little lost, Sophia continued, eyes flicking over Isla in slow, deliberate assessment. I suppose that makes sense. You're new here. You don't know how things work yet. Something in Isla bristled, the way she said it. Like Isla was temporary, a passing phase, a toy Damian would tire of. I'm learning quickly, Isla said, forcing herself to stand tall. Sophia's smirk widened. Are you? She stepped closer, perfume laced with something sharp and intoxicating. I wonder, she mused, if you know what happens to the ones before you. Isla's stomach twisted. Before her? You think you're the first woman Damian has taken to his bed? Sophia purred, voice a velvet dagger. You think you'll be the last? Isla swallowed. Of course, she wasn't the first. But why did it hurt to hear it? You seem very invested in my relationship with Damian, Isla said, forcing a smirk of her own. Should I be flattered? Sophia laughed, a soft, knowing sound. Not flattered, she murmured. Worried. She leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. Damian keeps his pets until he gets bored. And when he does? Her green eyes gleamed with something dark. He doesn't just let them go. A chill curled down Isla's spine. What did she mean by that? And why? Why did fear curl inside her at the thought of being cast aside? She shouldn't want to stay. She shouldn't want to matter to him. But she did. And that terrified her most of all. The conversation was cut short when the heavy doors of the main hall swung open. A new presence entered. A man. Tall, cold, deadly. His silver-gray eyes scanned the room like a wolf surveying a den of prey. Everything about him screamed danger. And yet, something about him felt different from Damian. Colder, more calculating. The air shifted. The guards stiffened. Even Sophia's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second before she smoothly recovered. Well, well, she murmured, turning toward him. I wasn't expecting you, Lorenzo. Lorenzo. The name sent a ripple through the room. Even Isla recognized it. Lorenzo De Luca. The rival Mafia King, the only man who had ever dared challenge Damian, and lived. Damian appeared a second later, emerging from the shadows like he had been expecting this moment all along. His presence was instant, dominating. The two kings faced each other, a silent battle waged in their eyes. To what do I owe the pleasure? Damian drawled, voice smooth but edged with warning. Lorenzo smirked. You know why I'm here. Damian tilted his head slightly, amusement flickering in his gaze. Do I? Lorenzo's smile didn't reach his eyes. There's been a breach, he said. Men have been killed. Your men, my men. Someone is making a move against both of us. A beat of silence. And then, "The Russians," Damian said, voice clipped. Lorenzo nodded. "It seems our little war is no longer just between us." Damian exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders as if barely restraining the violence within him. "And you came here because?" Lorenzo's gaze flickered toward Isla for the briefest moment before returning to Damian. The air shifted, she felt it, a dark energy curling in the space between them. "I came here," Lorenzo said smoothly, "because as much as I hate you, Damian, I hate the Russians more." A slow, sharp smile unfurled on Damian's lips. "Then let's give them hell." The room was thick with tension. Damian leaned against his desk, arms crossed over his broad chest, his expression unreadable. Across from him, Lorenzo sat casually, legs stretched out, fingers tapping against the armrest of his chair like he had all the time in the world. But there was nothing casual about this moment. 2 kings, 1 war, and an uneasy truce that could shatter at any second. "You want me to believe," Damian said smoothly, "that you suddenly care about our men dying?" Lorenzo smirked. "I don't, but I do care about who's killing them, and it's not me, which means we have a problem." Damian's eyes darkened. He knew this was coming. For weeks, there had been whispers of someone new making moves in their city, a ghost in the shadows, striking from nowhere, killing men who had pledged loyalty to both kings. But what Damian hadn't expected was for the Russians to be involved. It changed everything, and it meant one thing. Someone was trying to start a war. Lorenzo exhaled sharply. "We both know what this means. If we don't handle it, they'll come for our businesses, our people, hell, even our families." Damian didn't flinch. "I don't have a family." Lorenzo's gaze flickered briefly toward Isla. The air shifted. A muscle in Damian's jaw tightened. For a moment, Isla felt like she wasn't just standing in the room. She was part of the game, a piece on their bloody chessboard. "I wouldn't be so sure about that," Lorenzo murmured. Damian's patience snapped. In one smooth motion, he was on him. The sound of a gun cocking echoed through the room. Damian's gun, pressed against Lorenzo's temple. "I think you're forgetting whose house you're in," Damian said, his voice calm but laced with something deadly. Lorenzo didn't move, didn't even blink. "Go ahead," he murmured, his smirk never faltering. "Pull the trigger. Start another war before you finish the first one." Silence stretched between them, the kind that tasted of blood and death. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Damian lowered the gun. But the message was clear. This wasn't a partnership. This was a temporary truce, and when it ended, one of them would die. The meeting ended an hour later. Lorenzo left with a promise: the Russians would bleed first. Damian disappeared into his study, giving orders to his men. And Isla? She found herself alone, or at least she thought she was, until a familiar voice slid through the dimly lit hall. "You should be careful, little pet." Isla turned. Sophia stood in the doorway, watching her. Her emerald eyes glowed like a cat's in the dark. "Men like Damian," she continued, stepping closer, "don't just take women into their bed, Isla. They take them into their world." Her voice was smooth, hypnotic, but beneath it there was something else, something dangerous. Isla squared her shoulders. "Why do you care?" Sophia tilted her head, studying her like she was some pretty little bird caught in a trap. "Because I've seen what happens to the ones who come before you." A slow, knowing smile spread across her lips. "And I know exactly what's going to happen to you." Isla's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" she demanded. Sophia took another step closer. "You feel it already, don't you?" she murmured. "The way he's getting under your skin. The way you're already." She leaned in, whispering the next words like a secret. "Becoming his." Isla's breath hitched, because it was true. She could feel it, this pull toward Damian, this need. But before she could say anything, Sophia's fingers brushed against the inside of her wrist. Something cold and metallic slid against her skin. A key. Sophia pressed it into her palm. Her voice was barely a whisper. "When the time comes, use it, and run." Then she was gone, leaving Isla alone, with a key, and a warning she didn't know if she should listen to. That night, Isla couldn't sleep. She tried, she tossed and turned, but no matter what she did, she still felt him. The ghost of his touch, the heat of his body from the night before, the way he made her feel. Her pulse quickened. Her breath turned shallow. Before she knew what she was doing, she was moving, leaving her room, following the darkened hall. To his door, she hesitated. 1 second. 2. Then she pushed it open. And there he was, standing by the window, shirtless, his back to her. He didn't turn, didn't even acknowledge her. But she knew he knew she was there. Her heart pounded. "Damian," she whispered. Slowly he turned, his midnight eyes locked onto hers, and in one fluid motion, he was on her, pressing her back against the wall, caging her in with his body. His breath was warm against her ear. "Tell me, Isla," he murmured, his voice a low growl. "Did you come here to run?" His fingers trailed down her arm. "Or did you come here to beg? To be ruined?" She didn't answer. She couldn't, because she already knew the truth. She wasn't running, she was falling, straight into the hands of the devil. And this time, she wasn't sure she wanted to stop. The room was silent except for the sound of Isla's shallow breathing. Damian's body pressed against hers, his heat surrounding her, consuming her. "Tell me, Isla." His voice was a low, dangerous whisper against her ear. "Did you come here to run, or did you come here to beg?" She felt the challenge in his words. A test, a trap. And God help her, she wanted to fall into it. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Damian's fingers brushed against her jaw, tilting her chin up so she had no choice but to look at him. His eyes were pure darkness, predatory, hungry, waiting for her to break. She should resist. She should. But when his lips brushed over hers, barely a touch, her body betrayed her. A sharp inhale. A shiver racing down her spine. He felt it, and he smirked. "Ah," he murmured, "there she is." Then he kissed her. Not soft, not gentle. It was devouring. A claim. She gasped, her fingers instinctively clutching at his shoulders. But he didn't stop, didn't slow, didn't let her breathe. This was dominance. This was submission. This was her giving in to the devil himself. His hands slid down, gripping her waist, pulling her closer, until there was no space left between them, no escape. And the worst part? She didn't want to escape. Hours later, Isla lay tangled in Damian's silk sheets, her skin still burning from his touch. She should feel regret, shame. Instead, all she felt was a dangerous kind of satisfaction. But as her mind cleared, reality came crashing in. What had she done? This wasn't just a man. This was Damian DeLuca, Mafia King, killer, monster. And now he owned her. A knot formed in her stomach as she turned to look at him. He sat on the edge of the bed, shirtless, his muscular back covered in scars. Old ones, deep ones. Evidence of a past he didn't talk about. Her heart clenched. "What happened to you?" she whispered before she could stop herself. He didn't answer right away. For a long moment he just sat there, staring into the darkness. Then without turning, he said, "I was 14 when my father first tried to kill me." Isla froze. Damian's voice was calm, too calm. "He didn't think I was strong enough to lead, so he left me in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by men who were ordered to kill me." A chill ran down her spine. She wanted to ask what happened next, but she already knew. He survived, and he never forgot. When he finally looked at her, there was something haunted in his eyes. "I don't trust people, Isla. They either betray you or they die." The way he said it made her chest tighten, because she understood what he was really saying. "Don't make me trust you, because if you do and you leave, I will never forgive you." And for the first time, Isla wasn't sure if she wanted to be his weakness or his destruction. Before Isla could respond, a gunshot rang out in the distance. Then another, and another, shouting, chaos. Damian was already moving, gun in hand, expression unreadable. Isla grabbed the sheets, heart racing. What's happening? But he was already out the door. She scrambled to follow, her bare feet cold against the marble floor. The sound of men shouting grew louder as she reached the top of the grand staircase, and froze. The front doors had been blown open. Gunmen swarmed inside. The Russians. Oh my God. She barely had time to react before she saw a figure collapse to the ground, blood spreading across the floor. Lorenzo. His eyes locked onto hers for one brief second. Then his head lolled to the side. Isla choked back a scream. She barely noticed the arms that grabbed her, dragging her back, away from the fight, but she knew who it was before she even turned. Damian. His grip was bruising. His expression was pure rage, but his voice was soft, deadly. "You should have stayed in bed, little pet." Then, before she could say another word, he threw her over his shoulder and carried her away. When Isla came to, she was in a different room, dark, cold. The air smelled like leather and whiskey, and Damian was there, watching her, waiting. "Why did you bring me here?" she whispered. He stepped closer. "Because it's time for you to make a choice." Her breath caught. What choice? His lips curved into something dark, something terrifying. "You can run." His voice was smooth, controlled. "I'll give you a head start. But if I find you?" He leaned down, his breath brushing against her lips. "I will never let you go again." Her pulse pounded. "And if I stay?" His eyes darkened. "If you stay," he murmured, "you belong to me, forever." Isla swallowed hard. Because no matter what she chose, she was already his. Isla's heart pounded as she crept through the darkened corridors of Damian's mansion. The house was still, silent. But she knew better. He was always watching. Still, she had to try. Barefoot, she slipped through the grand hall, keeping to the shadows. Every step brought her closer to the massive doors leading outside, her chance at freedom. 3 more steps. Her fingers touched the cold handle. Then the world spun. A vice-like grip clamped around her wrist, yanking her back with brutal force. She barely had time to gasp before she was slammed against the wall, Damian's body pinning her in place. Trapped. "You really thought you could run from me?" His voice was smooth, deadly, mocking. His breath was warm against her ear, sending shivers down her spine. "I warned you, Isla." She struggled, her heart hammering. "Let me go." He laughed, low and dark. "Oh, sweetheart. I don't think you understand yet." His grip tightened, his fingers pressing into her delicate bones. Not enough to break, but enough to remind her who had the power here. "You don't get to run." His voice was lethal silk. "Not from me, not ever." Her stomach twisted in a mixture of fear and something far more dangerous, something that made her tremble in ways she couldn't explain. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Now," he murmured, his thumb tracing her lower lip. "Tell me, should I punish you for this?" Her breath hitched. Because the way he said it, it wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. The room was dimly lit, the golden glow of the fireplace casting flickering shadows across Damian's face. Isla sat on the edge of his bed, her wrists bound behind her with black silk. Her pulse pounded as he circled her like a predator, his expression unreadable. "You disobeyed me, little pet." His voice was deceptively soft. "And now you'll learn." A shiver raced down her spine, not just from fear, but from the way he looked at her. Like he owned her. Like he was going to break her. And the most dangerous part? She wanted it. Hours later, Isla lay on the bed, her body aching, her mind spinning. She had expected pain. But what she hadn't expected was the way he had touched her. Possessive. Intoxicating, like he would never let her go. Like she was his obsession. A part of her should hate him. But when she looked at him now, half-dressed, standing by the window, a gun in hand, she knew the real danger wasn't him. It was what he made her feel. "Are you going to kill them?" Her voice was hoarse. He didn't turn. "The Russians?" She nodded. His fingers tightened around the gun. "They started a war they can't win." His tone was cold, final. She swallowed hard. "And if they don't stop?" Finally, he turned to her, his dark eyes gleaming in the firelight. "Then I'll burn their entire empire to the ground." And God help her, she believed him. A knock at the door shattered the silence. Damian's second-in-command, Adrian, stepped inside, his face grim. "We found the traitor." Isla's breath caught. Damian's expression didn't change. "Who?" Adrian hesitated. Then he said a name Isla never expected. Lorenzo. The man who had bled out on the marble floor. The man Damian had once called brother. A muscle ticked in Damian's jaw. Isla saw the betrayal in his eyes, but when he spoke his voice was pure ice. "Then we finish this." And Isla knew blood was about to be spilled. The warehouse smelled of rust, gasoline, and death. Lorenzo was on his knees, his hands bound behind him, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. Damian stood in front of him, his expression blank, unreadable. A god before a man awaiting judgment. Adrian and 2 other men stood by, their guns drawn. But they weren't needed. Because Damian didn't need anyone else to deliver the killing blow. "You were my brother." Damian's voice was eerily calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that came before a storm. Lorenzo lifted his head, his swollen eye barely opening. "I didn't." The crack of Damian's fist against his jaw echoed through the warehouse. Isla flinched from her place in the shadows. She hadn't wanted to come. She had begged not to. But Damian had dragged her here, forced her to see what happened when someone crossed him. "You fed the Russians information," Damian continued, his knuckles smeared with blood. "You gave them my roots. You set me up." Lorenzo coughed, spitting blood onto the concrete. "It wasn't me. It was." Damian's boot slammed into his ribs. Lorenzo choked on a scream, his body collapsing sideways. Isla's stomach twisted. She should hate this. She should feel disgusted. But there was a part of her, dark and hidden, that couldn't look away. Damian turned, his eyes meeting hers across the dim warehouse. "Are you watching, pet?" His voice was pure silk. Dark, sinister, addictive. She shouldn't answer. She shouldn't nod. But she did. And something in his gaze lit up, as if her submission was exactly what he wanted, exactly what he craved. "Put the gun in her hands." Isla's breath caught. She must have heard wrong. Adrian hesitated. "Boss, I said," Damian's tone sharpened. "Put the gun in her hands." Adrian obeyed. Isla's fingers trembled as the cold metal was pressed into her palm. The weight of it was suffocating. Damian moved behind her, his chest flush against her back, his hand curling over hers. "You want to leave, don't you?" His lips brushed against her ear, a devil's whisper. Her pulse skipped. She did. Didn't she? "Then pull the trigger," Lorenzo wheezed. "Please." Isla's hands shook. She had never held a gun before, never been this close to death. "Go on, pet," Damian coaxed. "Be a good girl for me." The word sent a sick thrill through her veins. Her finger twitched. The air was thick, suffocating. She could end this. She could prove that she wasn't just his pet, that she could be more. But she couldn't. The gun slipped from her fingers, clattering to the ground. Tears burned her eyes as she turned, shoving against Damian's chest. "I'm not like you," she gasped. He caught her wrists, easily, effortlessly. "No," he agreed, his eyes flashing with something unreadable. "But you will be." And then he turned and shot Lorenzo himself. The sound ripped through the silence. Blood splattered across the floor. Isla screamed. But Damian only smirked. "Lesson number 1, sweetheart," he murmured, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "You don't hesitate in this world." Her stomach churned, and for the first time, she realized she might never leave. Because Damian wasn't going to let her go. The drive back to the estate was silent. Isla's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She still felt the ghost of the gun in her palm, still heard the echo of the shot. When they arrived, she stormed inside, desperate to get away from him. But Damian followed. Of course he did. "Running from me again, pet?" His voice was mocking. She whirled on him, fury laced in her veins. "You're a monster," she spat. He tilted his head, completely unaffected. "And yet," he murmured, stepping closer, "you're still here." Her breath caught as he closed the distance. Too close. Dangerously close. "I should leave," she whispered. His hand came up, fingers curling around her throat, just enough pressure to make her pulse race. "But you won't," he murmured. She shivered, and she hated that he was right. "You want to know why?" His lips brushed the shell of her ear. She didn't want to hear it, but she needed to. "Because, Isla," he whispered, his voice dripping with sin. "You belong to me now." And then, his mouth was on hers. bruising, claiming. A kiss that shattered her world and set her on fire. She should have fought, should have pushed him away. But instead, she surrendered. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you loved it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.